Connecting the four-way switch junction box containing cables to switches, light and power source. Sketch of the connection in the junction box and installation of the four-way switch. The standard 1-gang, 22.5 cubic inches, PVC switch junction box is too small to fit all the wires and switch for this connection. To accommodate more than 11 14-gauge wires, including the switch in the calculations, as it required by National Electrical Code, a larger capacity junction box must be installed, such as a 4 inches square PVC or metal junction box of appropriate depth. Also, their mud rings have additional capacity. A 4 inches square metal junction box with a capacity of 30 cubic inches was selected for this installation. In addition, its mud ring has an additional capacity of 3.5 cubic inches. 4 inches square metal junction box is already installed, and 4 14-gauge NM, non-metallic sheathed, cables enter the junction box through an approved cable connectors. Push-in button type cable connector and 2 screws clamp cable connector. 14 3nm cable from the first 3-way switch. 14 3nm cable from the second 3-way switch. 14 2nm cable from the power source. 14 2nm cable to the light outlet. For these cables and switch, the total junction box volume required is 26 cubic inches, 10 wires, 2 cubic inches each, equals 20 cubic inches. 4 ground wires as 1 wire, equals 2 cubic inches. Switch as 2 wires, equals 4 cubic inches. This junction box with mud ring is 33.5 cubic inches, 30 cubic inches junction box and 3.5 cubic inches mud ring. The cable must be long enough to be properly spliced and must be secured to the building structure within 12 inches of the cable entry into the junction box. Hole for grounding screw installation. Remove the cable sheath. The cable sheath shall extend into the junction box no less than 1/4 inch. 14 3 and 14 2nm cable wires. White, neutral wire. Bare, ground wire. Black, hot wire. Red, second hot wire. Grounding screw. Pre-install the grounding screw. Pre-installed grounding screw. Wrap the ground wire from one of the cables around the grounding screw and tighten the screw. Ground wire tightened with grounding screw. Green wire nuts, which should only be used to connect the ground wire. The green wire nut has a special hole at the top that allows the bare pigtail of the ground wire, one of the ground wires to be spliced, to be exposed for connection to an electrical device after splicing. Popular tan wire nut which that fits most connections. Group all ground, bare, wires together. Wrap the longer wire around the shorter ones, and trim the shorter wires to no less than 6 inches long. Longer wire wrapped around the shorter wires and shorter wires trimmed. Trimmed wires must be free at least 6 inches from the removed cable sheath. And the wires must extend at least 3 inches from the front of the junction box. The longer wire left for the pigtail must be long enough to be connected to the electrical device once spliced. Route the longest of the ground wires, bare, through the hole in the green wire nut and secure the wrapped wires with this wire nut. The connection is secured with a green wire nut, and the pigtail exits from the wire nut hole. 3 to 5 twists of wires are sufficient, as too many twists can damage the wires. Insert the ground wire connection into the junction box, leaving the pigtail wire outside the box. Ground wire connection inside the junction box, and its pigtail wire outside the box. Group the hot wire, black, from the cable from the first 3-way switch, one of the 2 3-way switches you selected, whichever one, and the hot wire, black, from the cable from the power source. Trim them to no less than 6 inches long and strip the insulation from the ends of the wires by about 1/2 inch. Wire ends stripped of insulation. Trimmed wires must be free at least 6 inches from the removed cable sheath, and the wires must extend at least 3 inches from the front of the junction box. Using pliers and a wire nut or just a wire nut, splice both wires and insert them into the junction box. Twisting the wire ends with pliers ensures a better connection. Wires connected and connection secured with wire nut. 3 to 5 twists of wires are sufficient, as too many twists can damage the wire insulation. Connected wires inside the junction box. Group the neutral wire, white, from the cable from the power source and the neutral wire, white, from the cable to the light outlet. Trim them to no less than 6 inches long. Strip the ends of the wires about 1/2 inch, splice them together and insert them into the junction box. The wire ends are stripped, connected with pliers to ensure a better connection, and a wire nut, and then inserted into the junction box. Group the hot wire, black, from the cable from the second 3-way switch and the hot wire, black, from the cable to the light outlet. Trim them to no less than 6 inches. Strip the ends of the wires about 1/2 inch, splice them together and insert the spliced wires into the junction box. Spliced hot wires. Insert it into the junction box. Use black electrical tape or other means to mark the white wires from the cables from the three-way switches as hot wires, as they will no longer be neutral wires in those cables. White wires from three-way switch cables marked as hot. Group all remaining wires and the ground pigtail wire together and trim them to no less than 6 inches long. Trimmed wires. Insert them into the junction box. Trimmed wires inserted into the junction box. Install the junction box mud ring appropriate for the thickness of the wall finish. Junction box mud ring installed. To connect the four-way switch, remove the wires from the junction box and strip the ends of the wires about 1/2 inch. Wires to be connected to the switch are stripped about 1/2 inch. Make a loop at the end of each wire. A loop is made at the end of each wire. Junction box wires to be connected to the four-way switch. Ground wire, bare, that must be connected to the ground terminal of the switch, green screw. Hot wires, red and white marked black, from the cable from the first three-way switch, which should be connected to the input terminal of the switch as a pair, as per the manufacturer's instructions, as the first three-way switch is powered from the power source. In fact, it does not matter which of the two connection terminals, input or output, the wires are connected to as long as they are connected to this terminals as a pair from the same cable. Hot wires, red and white marked black, from the cable to the second three-way switch, which should be connected to the output terminal of the switch as a pair, as per the manufacturer's instructions, as the second three-way switch is connected to the light outlet, or the remaining free terminal of the switch. Four-way switch, front view. Four-way switch, rear view. Ground terminal, green screw. Input terminals, black screws. Output terminals, gold screws. Connect the ground wire, bare, to the ground terminal of the switch, green screw. Ground wire connected. Connect the hot wire, white marked black, from the cable from the first three-way switch to one of the switch input terminals, black screw. Wire connected. Connect the hot wire, red, from the cable from the first three-way switch to second switch, input terminal, black screw. Wire connected. Connect the hot wire, red, from the cable from the second three-way switch to one of the switch output terminals, gold screw. Wire connected. Connect the hot wire, white marked black, from the cable from the second three-way switch to second switch output terminal, gold screw. Wire connected. The wires from the cables can be connected as a pair from the same cable to the input or output of the four-way switch terminals, in any order. To maintain consistency, wires of the same color are connected to the same side of the switch. Insert the wires into the junction box. Make sure the ground wire does not touch any hot terminal of the switch. Secure the switch to the junction box and install the switch wall plate. If this video is helpful, please subscribe. Comments are welcome.